So I usually hate starting with this question, but can someone give a thumbs up on the chat box if you can hear me? The one question that I don't want to open with, but to be sure. Okay, great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, or as we say here in the Netherlands, dames en heren. What you see on screen in front of you is one of my favorite photos of one of my greatest inspirations. And it leads me to a question to all of you. Why do people climb mountains? This question fascinated Professor Dan Ariely, a behavioral economist from Duke University who researches the link between money, motivation, and work. And he said it makes no sense. Why would anyone climb a mountain? It must be the most miserable experience ever. You are extremely cold, wearing uncomfortable clothing. You're climbing up a treacherous mountain where every step you take could be the last step ever. If you are so lucky to make it to the summit, that's when you would think, oh, this is where time stops still. This is when you can relax and enjoy the view. But any mountain climber will tell you that the summit is extremely dangerous. The weather up there can go from calm to thunderstorm in a matter of minutes. And the descent down the mountain is even more dangerous than the ascent. So then you would think that once these crazy climbers have actually made it down the mountain in one piece, back to the safety of their homes, they would think to themselves, what was I doing? Never again. Is that what happens? What do you think is the first thing these climbers, these crazy climbers, want to do once they've gotten down the mountain safely? They want to climb a higher one. They want to climb the Everest. And if they can't find a mountain that's even higher, they'll find one that's never been climbed before, which is crazy to me and which is crazy to Professor Dan Ariely. So really the question is, what's pushing them? What's motivating them to summit their Everest? Ladies and gentlemen, dames en heren, I truly believe that today I'm speaking with should we call us a room, a global room full of people who are on a journey of summiting their own Everests. And I know that your summit, each and every one of your summits may look different. Your challenges ahead will be different. But my intention today for the next half an hour is to share strategies, hacks on how we can successfully overcome the adversity and achieve all our summits together. Now, I don't know if you already know a little bit about me, but long story short, I'm Sangbreeta Moitra and I hack human behavior. My background is with a passion for neuroscience. I studied neuroscience. I worked in global management of neuropsychiatric illness studies, and then I went into entrepreneurship as a neurobehavioral strategist for leadership transformation. So you can see that the neuro has stayed integral to my career. And what really fascinates me is people dynamics. Why do we behave, think, believe, decide, react, communicate the way we do? And the reason why this topic itself and today, this neuro, keeps coming up is because we are in a time of adversity. We saw a crazy year that was 2020. And the topic of today's talk as well is your professional presence during adversity. How do you transform that? And when it comes to working in adversity, it is so important to really understand the drivers of human behavior. Get into the mind of your decision maker and understand what's triggering their stressors, their needs, what's making them react versus respond, and how will you earn their time, attention, trust, or money. All right, so let's get into it. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Great. That was my first question. Can you hack the brain of your decision maker? Now, for the next few seconds, I'm actually going to take you back to one of my first neuroscience classes, which was so exciting. The whole intention is to find ways in which we can use our knowledge of human behavior to build powerful connections in a time of human isolation, to make sure that with your professional presence, not only do you stay relevant, but you're able to persuade, influence, inspire people, encourage them to see the best in you, and make sure that this crisis becomes an opportunity for growth for you. All right, can we move on to the next slide, please? Great. Now, what you see in front of all of you are the three facets of the human brain. The lizard brain, which as it says here, is about the autopilot, fight, flight. It's also the primal reactive brain, threatened. It also loves contrasts, sharp contrasts. So think of those telemarketing or social media advertisements on before, after. What they're going for is your primal lizard brain. The other facet of our brain is the mammalian brain, the limbic system. This is about emotions, connections, memory, attachment. And the final one is the human brain, the neocortex. It's about logic, rationality, reason. This is where the data, numbers, that all fits in here. Mammalian brain, storytelling. Lizard brain, shock factor, shock value. Why am I sharing this with you? Now, in the last period of the period of adversity that we've had, look back at the kind of people you interacted with. And can you find patterns in the way they behaved? Was a certain person more reactive, limbic by nature? Was a certain person more driven by their data, their numbers, their graphs, rationality, reason? Once you can create a mental profile of the behavioral profile of the person, the decision maker that you want to connect with, you will be able to, well, I say sell without selling, but essentially to create a strong impact with your professional presence. So let's take it one step further. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So keep it there. Yes. So when I was researching the impact of our presence, the way we build relationships, the way we create a strong impact in people's minds in situations of transformation, adversity, crisis, etc., I decided to do an experiment. What had happened was an organization had approached me asking to speak on transforming customer connection. And of course, I could go on stage and talk about what other successful organizations or people had done, but I decided to do an assessment of my own. So I took my model and I decided to assess it on my LinkedIn article readership. So essentially, the topics that I will address today are topics that I've tested through my LinkedIn article readership. What I did is I took one of the first articles I ever wrote, which, as you can see on screen, is called Powerful Speaking Lessons from Dutch Directness, because I live in the Netherlands. It's always cultural communication is a fun topic to explore. And at the time when I wrote this article, as you can see, I had about 800 views, 50 likes, 8 comments, 7 shares, etc. I was very happy with whatever reaction I got. And then when I had the opportunity to talk about transforming customer connection, I decided to apply my strategies and see if it would create any difference in the measurement of its impact. And to be as organic as possible, I did not ask anyone to like or share or comment on my article. I stayed as true and authentic to the way I had shared the article. And at the same time, let me assure you, my LinkedIn followers numbers had not increased by a huge, massive majority. It was probably a few hundred more. Anyway, can you click the next button, please? What you see here is the impact of that rewritten article with the same intention. The article was written with the same intention, but I had modified how I wrote it and how I engaged and communicated with my reader. At the end of that month, the viewership increased to about 20,000 views, 1,200 likes, etc. Eventually, it reached over 3,500% growth in the article readership. The intention of sharing this with you is to show you how much small hacks, the impact of small hacks create. And if this can be possible with simply an article. Quick second right here. You just saw the previous slide where I showed you the numbers. I showed you what experiment I had done. I gave you a small story. I shared some numbers with you. In the chat box, can you tell me which of the 3 brains did I intend to connect with? Which of your 3 brains did I intend to connect with? Was it your lizard brain? Was it your mammalian limbic brain, the emotional brain? Was it your neocortex, the numbers brain? And whatever answer you choose, can you also give a short answer why you're choosing it? So if you're saying lizard brain, why do you say lizard brain? If you say neocortex, why do you say neocortex? So I'm curious to know, okay, I see Melita saying neocortex, appealing to numbers and facts. That's a good one. I'll reveal the answers soon enough, but I'll wait for the answers to come in. In the meanwhile, you see on your screen another slide which says you have power over your brain. And it mentions a few of our neurotransmitters that are an active part of determining how we feel, of our everyday emotions. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is when it comes to your professional presence, the way you are building relationships with your stakeholders, your decision makers, turning people into your strategic partners, your allies, your supporters, your brand ambassadors. Whether this person is someone who's going to interview you, promote you, or simply have a discussion with because you want to increase your network. It's important to also understand, especially in a time of adversity, what are the subconscious ways in which we can create strong connections with the mind of the people we want to network with, ally with, we want to impress or be a part of our tribe. So the first one you see in there is dopamine. Now the dopamine, the neurotransmitter dopamine, is about the rewarding behavior. So I ask you now, in your professional line of work, the value that you stand for, is your work and how are you communicating the power of your vision, of your value, your work in a way that gives people the sense of a rewarding high? That's what dopamine does. Now, if you notice in the previous slide where I showed the before-after numbers, for the client, when I presented the talk, not only was I sharing my personal strategies on how they could transform their customer connection, I also showed them how my own assessment numbers increased by over 3,500%. So for that client, that was a mega dopamine high because they got the sense of achievement, thinking if she can do it, and she's teaching us or she's sharing her strategy with us, we can do it too. So that's dopamine for you. How are you giving people the sense of a high of being rewarded? The second on screen is serotonin. Serotonin is giving you the pleasure of gaining a one-up position, as in social importance. This is called your ethos. Ethos, as said by Aristotle, is your credibility, your authority. So how are you making people feel that whatever association that you want to discuss will be something that's unique, that will be something that's different from the rest? What will be the standout value of whatever it is that you're proposing? Whether it's a job that you're applying for, it's a career transition, it's furthering your advancing in your growth to leadership. How are you giving people that sense of this is unique, this is standout, this is pure value? That's serotonin for you. The third one on the screen is oxytocin. Oxytocin is social trust, psychological safety. The pathos, as Aristotle called it, pathos is passion, emotion, connection. It's essentially connecting with the limbic mammalian brain, that slide that I shared with you. So think of it this way. Oxytocin is through storytelling, creating strong connections and relationship building. So how are you stimulating that rush of oxytocin, the feeling of comfort, trust, faith, psychological safety in the minds of the people that you're connecting with? And finally, endorphin. Endorphin, we all know it's the neurotransmitter that loves that high of exercise. But what do you do when you're sitting on a chair and trying to connect with people, staring at a webcam and on a Zoom call? What you do there is, again, very closely related to the limbic brain, which is the mammalian brain. That's about humor, engagement, storytelling, interesting anecdotes. So the endorphin high is, for example, if somebody asks you, all right, tell me about yourself, and instead of simply stating a list of bullet points, you take them into an interesting story with lots of highs and lows, a fascinating story about how you brought change in your line of work, whether it was a project you did or whether you were working at an NGO, whatever it was. Create that kind of energy within the conversation, that anecdote, to stimulate the endorphin high. What we're doing is knowing how our brain works. We're stimulating and emulating all these different sharp trigger points to build strong relationships with our decision makers and stand out with our professional presence during adversity. Okay, so now for a quick moment, I'm going to look at the chat box. I see Melita had written neocortex, Angela wrote reptilian. Yes, because it appeals to fast reaction, need to know, indeed. Orhan wrote very interesting. Okay, you talked about oxytocin, that's different. Well, thank you anyway for writing it. But indeed, in that slide deck, what happened is when I showed you the before-after sharp contrast, it appealed to the primal brain in you, that reactive lizard brain. In fact, even if, for example, you're making a presentation and you use sharp images, instead of using long text, you use an unusual image which will be a metaphor for your message. It immediately appeals, that visual input appeals to the reptilian lizard brain. Similarly, shocking numbers, contrasting numbers, that appeals to the reptilian brain. Also, because I shared proof of numbers off LinkedIn, and these are articles that still exist on my LinkedIn profile, it appeals to the neocortex because I've provided proof. And were this an emotional story of great inspiration, then indeed it would have also connected with your mammalian human emotional brain. Okay? All right, can we move on to the next slide, please? Now, we come to a very heavy question. How are you taking away the pain from the people you serve through your work? Now, last year, when we were going through this quite a surreal human experiment, as I call it, because a pandemic lockdown is something I have never experienced before in my line of work or in my lifetime, what I also observed was the mayhem it created in organizations across the world. And I had so many HR directors, business partners who were sharing very stressful situations that happened in their workplace because this sudden not knowing what's happening with this virus, not knowing who's infected, should we suspect anybody who sneezes or coughs? It's happened even in our supermarket where somebody sneezed by mistake and people were saying very abusive words, thinking this person is spreading the COVID virus. So it created this fear of uncertainty. At the same time, because we went into the sudden lockdown, remote working, completely working online, it also created a lot of mayhem in the way teams were communicating with one another, the way we were communicating with stressed clients and customers. So at the time, I created this model called the 3 A's of leadership presence. Essentially, it's based around your authority, authenticity, and adaptability, and how that transforms your leadership presence in crisis. Now, that takes a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take small facets from that, from my model and share it with you. So this question is, how are you taking the pain away from the people you serve? And this is about your authority. Now, a lot of people in this call today are corporate professionals. You could be directors, managers, business analysts. You could also be coaches, executive coaches. But for a moment, let me take away that job title from you. And now I ask you, how do you explain the value that you stand for? How do you explain how you take pain away from the clients, from the people you serve through your work? What would your answer be? Imagine if that was the only sentence that I allowed you. Let's say that I was the queen of the day for one day, and I could allow you only to use one sentence on your business card, on your LinkedIn profile, on any introduction that you could give for yourself, instead of your job title. What would your value be, and how would you say you're taking the pain away from the people you serve? Can we move on to the next slide, please? Now, this is a question that has fascinated me it has fascinated many of us. What is your why? And many of you, can you let me know in the chat box if you've ever heard of Simon Sinek's TED Talk, Start With Why? Yes, no, whatever it is, don't be shy, let me know. Okay, people have heard of it, great. Those who haven't heard of it, what a joy for me to share it with you for the first time. So there's Simon Sinek, who's a management guru, so to say, with a background in psychology, who gave a TED talk called Start With Why. Essentially, his question was, don't ask what you do, start with why do you do. And in his TED talk, essentially, he asked a very simple question. Why do you do what you do? It was a question. And his entire TED talk, but also his 20 plus years of work experience are focused on basically answering that one question. Basically, he would go to the head, CEO of a company and say, why do you do what you do? And then he helps that company figure out why they do what they do. Dan Ariely, who I opened with, the behavioral economist, he has a simple question. What motivates you to earn money? What motivates you to work? Is it money or something else? And his entire work as behavioral economist is on helping people find the answer to that one question. In my TED talk as well, it's a section we come to later on in this talk, I asked one simple question, and the entire TED talk that I gave was focused on answering or helping people answer that one question that I proposed to them. So now I ask you, what is your why question? Not what is your why, what is the question? What is the question that you're helping your clients, your stakeholders, your decision makers, your customers find the answer to? What would that question be? So for example, Simon Sinek on his LinkedIn profile, I can see his title saying, Simon Sinek, why do you do what you do? Dan Ariely, what motivates you to work? Is it money or something more? I had asked in my TED talk, how do you want people to feel when they work with you? So if I had to ask you this question, what is your why question? What is that question that you represent, that you help people with? What would that question be? And as I see here, Irina, hi Irina, she writes here, why, how, what is the reverse order of how we usually function? Okay, I'm not sure what that means, but maybe we can check in later. But let me leave you with this. What is your why question? Can we move on to the next slide, please? Now, this is something that's integral to building a strong professional presence, especially during adversity. Are you leading your client relationships with intention or transaction? And I see this happen a lot where people are leading a conversation clearly with a transaction in mind. And I can see why. It's good to have an agenda in mind because you know exactly what you want and this person can give you what you want. But for a moment, let me take you into the mind of that person that you're communicating with. When you lead with a transaction in mind, with a hidden agenda, that person realizes that, okay, all I am to this person is a stepping stone, nothing else. It's more of you scratch my back, I scratch yours. There is no greater need for this person to want to know me. What happens then is we're effectively killing any scope of trust, relationship building, psychological safety, and the incentive for that person to find value in us. I always believe that the price of a relationship is priceless compared to the price of a contract. So I would rather value the merit of building a long-term trustworthy relationship with someone than a quick contract or opportunity coming in or not, because opportunities come and go, but people relationships stay forever. So instead I recommend, can you lead with intention? When you meet someone, whether it's a decision maker, a leader, a stakeholder, client, customer, whatever your line of work is, how are you going to lead that conversation with intention? How are you going to bond with that person with intention? How would you differentiate between leading with intention versus leading with transaction? This also is a part of your authority building and authenticity building. Because when you lead with intention, you create, again, the beautiful emotions of released by oxytocin, serotonin, you create strong bonds. Okay, let's move on to the next question, to the next slide. Now what we have here, and I would love to know how much time I have left. Is it a couple of minutes? Because we did start a few minutes later than planned. So Anirvan or Simeon, if you could let me know by chat or
yeah, it's roughly about 3 minutes.
Okay, great. So what we're covering here right now is, what are people seeing in you? What is your communication style saying in you, saying about you? Now, last year, another interesting research I did was to find the psychodynamics of our communication patterns, because I observed what was happening with the different teams that I was advising, training, coaching, because I work a lot with leadership and management teams. And then I recognized different patterns in the way they were presenting themselves. And what I'm going to do is going to go through them real quickly and show you what to look out for. Now, one of the patterns that I noticed was what I call the victim pattern, this psychodynamic pattern of victim style of communication, which was when they were communicating anything about themselves, it was never ever an I, it was always something happening to me. What do I mean by that? Let me give you a very basic example. There's a door right ahead of me, and let's say I walk through the door and my toe stubs against the door. What would your reaction to that be? Would you say, if this happened to you, you ran into the door, would you say, oh, the door hit my toe, or the door hit me? Or would you say, I ran into the door? Which of the two would you say? Just write it in chat box. Now, what I noticed was the people who were constantly leading their conversations in teams with, things are happening to me. This person said this to me. This person behaved this way to me. This problem happened to me. That was actually subconsciously communicating a victim mindset. Now, I also want you to feel very safe in this group. What stays here, what is discussed here stays here, and there are no judgmental opinions being shared. This is simply an open conversation. But keep that in mind. If you notice this pattern in yourself, that's a time for you to switch the way you're communicating, but also to observe this pattern in people around you. And that will give you an indication of how this person is perceiving themselves or the situation they're in. And in that sense, you can step up and perhaps take more of a leadership role to guide this stressed client, customer, stakeholder in a time of adversity. Another pattern, for example, I noticed was a lot of yes questions were being asked. Now, what do I mean by a yes question? Let's say Tony Robbins. Anybody heard of Tony Robbins? You can just write yes or no in the chat box. So Tony Robbins is this motivational speaker, I guess, huge in the 90s and early 2000s. So he has a classic classic set of questions he loves to ask people. Do you want to be rich? Yes. Do you want to be a millionaire? Yes. Do you want to have a gorgeous house with a pool and beautiful cars? Yes. So what he's doing is he's chasing yes answers. And I often noticed people in their conversations, whether they were pitching, they were interviewing, they were trying to win a client or customer, they were leading their conversations by trying to get a yes out of people. But here's the danger in when you pursue a yes from people. What happens is people feel cornered, pressured, and threatened to say yes, because now there's peer pressure to, who says no to, do you want to be rich? No, I don't want to be rich. Do you want to be a millionaire? I don't want to be a millionaire. Nobody wants to say that. So people are actually pressurized into saying yes. But if you structure your conversation in a way that you get them to say no to you, still getting to the same response, but get them to say no to you, they're actually going to be more safe, feel more trustworthy, and build stronger relationships with you. For example, do you want to have sparkling clean teeth? Yes. But do you want to have absolutely rotting teeth? No. We still got to the same answer. Do you want to be rich? Yes. Or do you want to be well off? Yes. But if I ask you, do you want to be homeless? Do you want to see a day when you don't even have enough to provide for a sick parent or take care of your child? No, of course I don't want to see that day. So I'm saying no to you. I'm disagreeing with you. Yet I'm getting to the same intention that you have in mind. By getting people to disagree with you, yet with the same intention, instead of saying a yes, you actually win their psychological safety, trust, and faith a lot more than simply chasing a yes answer. So I encourage you in your presence, in your conversations, chase a no, value the no a much more than you would value a yes. And finally, I will end it with a challenge for all of you. I had a lot more planned for you, but 30 minutes calls for a wrap up. What is a talk without a call to action? So I call this the 10 No Challenge. And I created this challenge when I experienced when I saw that people were afraid of taking risks and stepping up for themselves during adversity. So the 10 no challenge is basically make a list of all the things that you aspire for yourself. Now, whether it's to start something new, to do a career transition, to grow into a role of leadership, to ask for a raise, a promotion, whatever it is, make a list of all your desires, your aspirations that you have. And I would say go big, dream big, prepare for them, and then start going after them, pursuing them, chasing them with the intention of getting a no. Why on earth am I asking you to get rejections for yourself? Number one, our current mindset is built around the fact that success is only achieved by getting yeses. What happens is when we gamify this, every no that you get has to be the trigger for you to go out there and ask for your next aspiration, for your next want. Every time that you go and ask something for yourself and you gamify this in the process because you need to collect 10 no's, what happens is the pain of rejection in your brain, we rewire that neural pathway because now the pain is replaced with dopamine, it's replaced with endorphins because now we are doing a challenge. And what you will notice that the pain of failure, the pain of rejection goes down because your excitement to run after the next reward, the next opportunity increases. So you rewire your neural pathway. And secondly, out of all the no's you get, these are the no's that you're pursuing that you never even thought to ask for. You start getting a few yeses. Amidst those no's, you get a few yeses. And those are the yeses that will transform your career because these are the yeses you never even thought to ask for yourself. So, what are the 10 no's that you're going to challenge yourself with? Will you take up on them? And please keep me posted on what are the no's and the yeses that you received in your path to transforming your professional presence during adversity. I'd like to end my talk by thanking all of you for being so conversational and sharing your thoughts in the chat box. And I've ended with one of my favorite quotes, that it is your attitude, not your aptitude, that will determine your altitude. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you the very best with achieving and summiting your greatest Everest. If you'd like to keep in touch with me, I'll write my name and email ID in the comments box, and let's keep in touch on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, Sangbreeta. And as usual, very inspiring, and it was also quite, it's quite heartening to see the audience, the attendees echoing the same thoughts. So, absolutely brilliant again. As always, we try to squeeze in as much as we can in such a short duration. And I'm sure if we had more time, we could have talked some more on this topic. But I would ask the attendees, the audience, to please follow us on our company page in LinkedIn. And this is where you can also get to interact with some of our speakers and panelists. That's a platform that we are trying to sort of create an ecosystem where people can come and interact. So with that, I would like to thank you. Sangbreeta has already posted her LinkedIn address in the chat box. So thank you again, Sangbreeta, for joining us here.
Thank you. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you.